Today, we're going to have a conversation with somebody I actually met. It was last week, beginning of last week at the Better Hospitality Conference. And actually, we met each other during the pandemic on this famous thing at that point. I don't actually know if it's famous anymore. I'm not there. Clubhouse. And Matt is doing some incredible thing to help people get the best out of their lives and build the best version of themselves. And Matt was sitting on a panel. He was specifically talking about something we're going to dive into later in the interview, which I thought was really interesting because I'm always trying to figure out how do we solve problems better. He's talking about job crafting. I'm going to come back to that. Enough about that. Welcome to the show, Matt. I'm excited that we got this opportunity because actually we've been circling around each other for a long time. And then by accident, we meet at the Better Hospitality Conference. And it was actually you that took the initiative to come over. Oh, Michael, I think we connected before. And then we had a great conversation about, life challenges and then job crafting as well.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is really great that we've finally met in person and now doing this now.
Matt, for people that haven't met you yet and don't know what you're up to, can you give them a bit of an overview of, probably your journey and your mission and what kind of change you're looking to make in the world?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Matthew Cameron, which you've covered already, but I run TMC Consulting, and I essentially look to improve employee retention, performance, and well-being in the workplace. So, essentially, through workshops and consulting and working one-on-one with leaders, I help them to reshape their leadership strategies to better align with the modern workforce, so that they can then go and achieve their operational objectives. It's been quite a journey. If you'd asked me a few years ago if this is what I would be doing, then probably wouldn't believe you. But it's been a great journey, and my background has always been hospitality.
And what did you do before you jumped out to helping leaders to find the best version of themselves? What kind of career did you have in hospitality?
So, if you don't mind me giving the long story, you know, I started in hospitality in 2006, I believe, back in Australia, in Brisbane, in a little fish and chip shop, and um, it was my first job. And to be honest, it was absolutely awful. I was, washing dishes. I was never shown how to do it, and it's actually a very difficult job. So shout out to all of the KPs out there. They're doing a wonderful job, and a very needed job in the kitchen. Without them, the entire system crumbles. So, that was my first job. And, every night, I was taking grief from the head chef and the owner. And, a couple of weeks into it, one of the waiters didn't show up and I got thrown on the floor and, once again, not told how to do anything, scolded for not remembering table numbers, which was a bit of a theme throughout my hospitality career. Something I always struggle with. But, essentially, while the owner was sat at the end of the bar, just yelling at me and treating me awfully, I decided that I was going to quit and leave hospitality and never come back. And that was my first job experience. And for a little while, that was very much the case. But my brother, he had spent some time overseas, and I wanted to feel a little closer to him, and he worked in hospitality, so I jumped back in, and um, I fell in love with it. I'm sure we'll come back to this. Like some people don't come back. I did, and I very much fell in love with the industry, and it's been very good to me as well. I've worked on both sides of the world, in Australia and in the UK, both in London and in Edinburgh. And, I've worked my way up from bottom to top in both bars and cafes, you know, washing dishes, picking up plates, picking up glasses, all the way up to, barista, bartender, bar manager, cafe manager. Um, it's been a great journey, and, I've won competitions and, awards and led, highly successful teams. it's been very good to me until for a period of time it wasn't. And I guess that's how I kind of end up doing what I'm doing now. That story, it begins in 2018,
Mm.
and it, reaches its climax, on the second day of 2019. And, that was the day that I planned to end my life. Um, for a period of time, I'd walk underneath a bridge, near home, and I would, just wonder if anyone would notice if I was gone, and, think I had no value in the world, and, I was floating through life, and, you know, nothing really had happened, but I found myself, in this place. And, when New Year's came around that year, I was sat at the bar I worked at, I was sitting up there by myself. I was drunk alone. And, while everyone else was celebrating, I was there making the decision that, I was going to end my life. And, you know, I had to work on the first. So I turned up that day, but I had the second off. And, that was the day that I'd planned to do it. And on that morning, woke up and I was at the edge of my bed, and, I tied up one of my shoes and I was ready to go do that. And then, I had this thought and something stopped me, and I'm not exactly, like a man of faith, but something happened in that moment. And ever since then, I've been on this journey to, understand what was going on in my life and, gain knowledge and improve my life, but to also help others and to make sure, other people don't go through what I once did. So I guess what makes me a little bit unique in this space of, trying to help businesses is not that I come from, an extensive HR background like most others in my space. It's, so I was once the employee that people put systems in place to protect and optimize and retain, but I very much fell through those cracks. But I guess something I've not told you yet is that, I skirted around it briefly before, but that was, at the time, there wasn't a whole lot wrong in my life. If you want to
Mm.
use that word, it's not quite the right word there, but, there was no big trauma. There was no breakup, no deaths in the family. And, these things that we commonly think about when, people
Yeah.
find themselves in a place like me. But
So no immediately crisis going on in principle, not like.
no. And, I didn't really understand what was going on. I just thought I couldn't handle the pressure that, hospitality sometimes brings on you. I used to wear this as, a badge of honor of like
Mm.
handling stress. And, we hear about it all the time. And, I was kind of doing the things I thought I already should do. But this for me is a bit of a problem with the conversation around, the work-life balance and well-being. It's like, my life outside of work was relatively fine. It was the work that was making me miserable.
Mm.
Um, you know, the environment and the leadership and, the daily grind, the 8 to 10 to 12 hours that I was spending, in this place, you know, it was draining me. And, with that, I take some responsibility. I started drinking and not taking care of myself and not sleeping well. And, my life was just, it was work and drink. And, I was feeling lack of purpose through that. And, it took me some time to reflect on my journey and to how I ended up where I did. And I now use that story, which is not uncommon either. It's a quite extreme case, but, it's something that happens a lot in our industry. So I use that story to help others and to make the connection between, the importance of culture and leadership and people. And work does have a giant impact on our lives. And that can be a positive experience or it can be a negative experience. So with that, businesses can thrive or they can struggle with, performance or retention or even attracting talent in the first place. And I guess that's why I'm so passionate about creating these environments where, people are fulfilled and happy and where businesses thrive with, a loyal and retained workforce.
There's a couple of things you said, like, and thank you for sharing that story, Matt, because I think like sometimes people need to hear the narrative of a story where they can, in a way, compare or see themselves in that. And I'm sure there will be people after the very hard time, and I hear these conversations all the time as I talk with people offline where they talk about. I did actually an interview that goes live next week with a guy called Dan Simons in the US. He's CEO and co-founder of something called Farmers Restaurant Group, a very successful, progressive restaurant group. And he talked about like his prime focus as the CEO, which is lovely to hear, is actually mental health for himself and his workforce. And how he actually, again, he says there's an element of systems, but there's also an element of being present as the CEO and talking about this. And he also talks a lot about menopause, which you think is like, so he wants to understand that because 55% of his workforce are female, and that has an impact on the mental health. So thank you for sharing that story. And it was really interesting, that you get that that moment, the thought comes to you, and then you make a shift, and then you said something else I think we should dive into later. This like there is positive things in life, and even though things are very positive, there can be some negative voices that have more space in your head than they should, or the work or the bar manager or the entrepreneur Matt has more space in life than he should have, and therefore it takes over.
There was a study done, and I looked at, the number one cause of unhappiness in life. And obviously it's probably only looking at the Western world, um, you know, hunger and famine and, war
Yeah.
wasn't included in this. But, obviously it's going to have lots of answers like, relationship breakdowns or money or, the dog or, all of these things that do cause bother in our lives. But, the number one thing that made people unhappy in their lives was work.
Wow.
You know,
Okay. Yeah. And that's really a good place to because I actually wanted to just to for you to talk a bit more about the work you do as well. So typical how you work is, I guess you work on a very individual level, but then also looking at how can the organization then put in the right, you can see, practices, systems, but actually starting from the bottom up, finding out where the individuals are and actually what kind of infrastructure needs to be in place. Can you talk a bit more about your approach and how that approach has maybe made some transformation with the individuals and companies you work with?
yeah, sure. Like you say, it's more of a bottom up approach than top down, but somewhat a little bit of both. It's bottom up, but from the management level, like we're not talking CEO level, but we are talking management. It's who I mainly talk to. And it's just about understanding what people want and what fulfills them. And I think this gets lost a lot. We have a tendency in hospitality to, promote the best bartender to bar manager, but we don't teach them how to lead people. We'll give them the functional steps of their next job. They've gone from, putting ingredients together to make a great drink. Now it's like, well, now you need to, make the rota and do the ordering and do this stuff, but don't actually teach them, the people side of things. And I guess that's what I try to help people with, understanding what people want and, the needs of the modern workforce and, the way things always have been don't need to be the way we do things moving forward because fundamentally, they're not working. There's huge issues in terms of, talent attraction and staff retention and mental health in the industry. And I don't mean to sound negative about the industry. The industry is amazing. Some of my best memories are, in hospitality. But there are issues we do need to address. And this comes down to people. Our biggest demographic in hospitality is 25 to 34. And they're also the most likely to leave the industry. The people that work in our industry, the biggest number, the biggest percentage, they're the ones we're losing. They're least likely to recommend to, their friends, their family, their younger brother, their younger sister to go into the industry. So it comes down to that leadership level. What experiences are these leaders creating for their teams? What environments are they creating? Is it enjoyable? Is it hard? Is it tiring? How do we create environments where people want to be, where they want to work and where they're enjoying their work alongside fulfilling, the business's goals and objectives. So if you can make that link between the people and the objectives, then, you're on your way to winning the battle.
And I think it's very interesting from our conversations before, and I totally agree with you. Personally myself, and my anecdote is not really relevant, but it was really interesting because I didn't see it before very late in my career. When I was around 19 years old, I got promoted into management role at McDonald's and had this he was not my direct boss, but he was like the supervisor, the ops manager, the ops director for the group, and he gave me a book, and it was Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. And I said, what the hell do I need this book for? I just need to be very technical, really good, really fast. And I didn't really read it before a couple of years after I went to uni, and there was this teacher that also had this book coming up again. And then actually I dived into it. And then, I'm still reading this book. And actually I think that, that he was so focused, and actually a lot of his intro to things was built around Stephen R. Covey, where a conference he used a sequence for that. Well, he was very much of this personal leadership because and I can remember he said, you need to lead yourself before you can lead others. And I didn't understand that before very late in my journey. That's actually it's the most important, but also the hardest, because you're building that resilience to be ready for when things becomes difficult. And actually, if you can't lead yourself properly, you also can't create these environments you're talking about. So I think it's super interesting. We actually have to start there. And actually, often we start about creating the environment before we actually had looked at on the people that's creating the environments.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a thing in mental health first aid training that, you need to be able to take care of yourself before, you take care of others. And it's the same with leadership. I completely agree with you.
What is the typical challenge you see when you come in and there is an environment that's not working? Where typical has it gone wrong? Is it on is it the systems? Is it individuals? What is it typical?
The first thing that came to mind when you were speaking just before is almost like I'm hesitant to use the phrase, but almost like a cycle of trauma. You mentioned that manager at McDonald's, and he obviously was on his way to understanding leadership and tried to guide you and help you, and that's amazing. But then you also have the other end of the spectrum, which someone who works 60, 70 hours a week, they expect people they're now managing to do the same. And, the environments they went through, the leadership that they had, they were the role models of who they are as a leader now. I was running a workshop with a luxury 5-star hotel in London, who I obviously won't name, but there was a man there who brought up that he couldn't get people to work an extra hour or an extra 2 hours after their shift, or they wouldn't be as flexible as what he was, and he went on a little bit of a back in my day rant that young kids don't know how to work, and I proposed to him, was like, well, are you giving them anything to work towards? Maybe the problem's not that they don't want to work, it's that you're not offering them something to work for. you know, what are they gaining from that extra hour? Is it just, taxable, £13? It's, are they then going to miss their bus home? What are they gaining from working for you? If they're not motivated, if they're not, you know, actively treating this as more than just a paycheck, then they're not going to be, willing to, take up their life purely because you're in need. So there's definitely a disconnect between, the management's needs and people's wants. And we're seeing this in the workforce now. There was an interesting study that showed, 93% of people are happy to ghost an interview, which is an alarming statistic. But there was a quote from former Apprentice, the TV show winner, who I believe runs a recruitment agency, and he said, people are more interested in what they can gain from a job now rather than what they can offer to it. So if you're not, offering something outside of a paycheck and you don't understand what people are looking for outside of, just security and money, and these things are absolutely important. But if you don't understand that next step, then you're going to have issues with, engaging your workforce and retaining them and even attracting them in the first place.
What are some of the things, like, because you're very close to this, Matt, what are some of the things you should be considering as a company or leader when you want to give people something more than just the benefits in principle and the security of a job and a paycheck? But what is like some of the best practices you see across the industry? And you don't have to mention anyone, but just like some of the practices.
It's a difficult one to give you a single answer on because everyone is different. It's why I focus on the management side of things. They're running smaller teams within a larger company. So if they can understand their team and their needs of their team as people rather than just as employees, then they can, take that next step to, you mentioned job crafting earlier, and we can jump onto that, I imagine at some point. But when they understand people on an individual level, then they can create solutions for them. There was a really interesting study that came out in January this year from Oxford University, and a lot of companies, they look at benefits and they look at what they can do to help
Yeah.
their employees, and often it's well intentioned. They will look at what other companies are doing and what the norm is, and what the research says. But this study came out and it looked at all of these individual level well-being interventions that a lot of businesses give their people. The gym memberships, the discounts, the meditation apps, the resilience trainings, these things. And this is not to say these things aren't effective in their own right, but in terms of improving happiness and well-being at work, they do almost nothing. And in some cases, they are actually dangerous because it's the business saying, we've given you the tools, and if you can't handle the pressure, that's your problem. It's something that you can't handle because everyone else is. But realistically, that's not true. There will be other people going through the same struggles. So this is why I think it's so important to connect with the management to change their perspective on how they lead their people on an individual level, rather than, these blanket benefits from the very top level, because they're the ones that can make the change. They're the ones creating the experiences. And if we can impact them and change their perspective, then we can change the experience of people.
It is super interesting when you talk about this individual focus as well, and by some part, kind of coincidence, over the last 3 months, I've talked with a number of leaders, and they talk about, like, if you want to fix this, they talk about the staffing crisis. You want to fix that, we need to meet people on the individual level, like we would do. We talked about at some point, we need to personalize the experience for customers. We need to personalize that experience for the employees. But actually, to be able to do that, as you say, there is managers out in these restaurants that actually needs the tools as well. So actually, you need to start there to get them the tools so they actually can get that individual experience. And some managers will be very fast at that because they are been on a different journey. They got 7 habits of highly effective people early in their career. I was never the best technical ops person, but I think because I had the boss I had very early on in my career, I was very good at the reasonably good at the people bit, which is the hardest bit, and you're never done there. That's the thing. That's not a success measure. You're never done. You can always do better on this. But they talked about that actually my job as and these are CEO level, ops director levels, is actually going around finding out if we're meeting the needs of the individual. That's my most important job. So it gave me so much hope. There was people talking about that. And then we go back and say, how does the system we have on people, benefits, compensation, the Headspace app, all contribute to that? And how do we actually guide them to that? Because they need a guide that says, I think you should maybe use the Headspace app a bit more often. The way I use it, but you need to find your own way. And it's about having these conversations more they talked about than it was actually having the system and the solution that fits everyone. But it's about having all these individual conversations. That's how you do it. I don't know. That's your. It seems like that's the same thing you were saying. That's the job that needs to be done.
Yeah, like the first four letters of the word, leader is lead. You need to show people that these things are okay, and that if we jump back to the stigma around mental health, I was on a panel on Monday, and it was a little bit different of a panel than what I'm usually on. I usually chat with businesses or at things like I met you at last week, the Better Hospitality Conference, which was a lot of operators. This was purely just based around mental health and sharing stories and vulnerability, and these are important things for leadership to do. If you are setting the example, so if you're showing that vulnerability and you're letting those walls down, then you're showing everyone else that it's okay to. And it's creating that trust and that environment where people feel open to making change or trying these things. When I was going through a tough time, I remember taking a cocktail suggestion to the bar manager at the time, and he completely shot me down. And the GM was there, and he kind of laughed. And when I'm going through this time, why am I then going to talk to them about, my struggles or my mental health? This space and this environment, it wasn't conducive to talk about a cocktail. So, why is it conducive to anything else, anything on that level? So, you are setting the example as a leader, and if you're working a 60-hour week, other people may think they have to. If you don't feel capable of talking about, these deeper level things, or you create an environment where, it's joked about or laughed about, then people aren't going to feel comfortable coming to you. So there's a hotel manager in London. Unfortunately can't remember the name of the hotel, but Miriam Baroli, she's a super inspiring general manager, and she operates just a culture of care. She is an amazing human being and walks around, and you can see that she cares and she knows people on, that personal level. And just hearing her speak a little while back, it was inspiring. And the example she sets her people gives them the space to open up and be their best and turn up every day and, present their best selves while at work.
It's quite interesting because I've always been interested in three pillars: leading yourself, leading others, leading the organization. And I was doing some research in this quarter, and I like to write a lot, and not all of it comes out, but it's actually for myself to understand. And I found out with a bit of research that actually culture means care. And lots of leaders talk about that. And actually it starts with that you have to care, because that's actually the essence of culture in Latin. And I think that's really interesting. Also, we think about food culture, country culture. It's that care, the Italian care about their food culture, the Spanish as well. So it's again coming back. There's a different angle, but it's again that care. Do you really care? And can you find that, deep humanity, the Dalai Lama inside yourself? I'm not saying we have to go all woo-woo, but we have to go on that individual journey as you're talking about.
Like, are people just you know, cogs in the machine, to get the business
Hmm.
money, or are they human beings? Like, no matter which way you fall on that, they're human beings.
Yeah.
It's important to understand.
Well, I think Chip Conley, the great hotelier from who's also been on the show, said on the podcast or interview that the biggest, forgotten fact in business that it's all about humans, and humans are the only thing that matters. So if you don't got that right, you're not going to win long term. Talk about job crafting, Mass, because I really want us to dive into that today. So you were talking about on the panel about job crafting. Just give people an idea about what job crafting means and what kind of outcomes you can get out of working with that
So,
concept.
so I believe it came out of Yale University in the States. And when we often talk about, flexible working, people often jump straight to, the time that they work,
Yeah.
having a 4-day work week, or moving their hours around a little bit. Um, but there are other things that can be flexible at work, and that's where job crafting fits. And I think it's really relevant to hospitality because, it's an almost 24/7 industry. You'll have some venues that are closed for only a couple of hours a day, and they are not the most flexible environments. They need their people to operate. They will have, their need of just people coming in, and the amount of staff they have on any shift will, dictate their turnover that day, the turnover of tables, and effectively their profits. So the job crafting, it essentially started looking at two cleaning crews in a hospital in America somewhere. And the first group, they described the job, exactly as what you would expect. They would list out their duties, like, almost like a job description, very just robotic. But the second group, they looked at their role completely differently. They didn't look at themselves as cleaners. They looked at themselves as, ambassadors for the hospital, or they played a role in, the healing patients. They created a clean and sterile environment where people could heal. And, they went about their day helping people. That was their purpose. They would help, elderly to their cars, or through, the maze of the hospital. And, they would do these small things that were actually outside of their job description. And there was a famous quote, from the study, and someone said, that's not part of my job, but that's a part of me. And I feel like that's a really powerful quote. Because, we all are humans. We've touched on it a couple of times already, and who you are will shape what you do. But essentially, job crafting will look at three further things that are flexible at work. The what, the how, and with who work is done. And people will often gravitate towards these things either way. You can set up a very strict, I guess, conveyor belt system of a workplace. But people will always gravitate towards, the things they enjoy more, and the people they
Mm.
enjoy more. It's just human nature. They'll gravitate to the things that they align with best. And why not take advantage of this? Why not? There's this idea in hospitality that everyone needs to be able to do everything, but it doesn't mean everyone has to always do everything. Put people where they're strong, put people where they're happy. Um, I was a bartender for a very long time, and I loved prep. Other people did not. You know, there were those, rock star style bartenders who loved being on, the main bar, on a Friday, Saturday night. And it wasn't just about, the bigger tips. It was, the show. They enjoyed the show. They liked to put their personality and their creativity out there. So, I'm a little bit more introverted. While I did enjoy that, I loved the meditative process of prep. So if you flip down roles and you put that bartender on all of the prep shifts, is he or she going to be overly happy? You know, they want something out of this job. They're, attracted to something about this job. Why not take advantage of that? Obviously, there will be times where they do need to do, a prep shift and, it's not that, black and white, but if you can understand what people want and what they gravitate towards, and you could take advantage of this. And, from that, you can build, developmental plans, and you can help them feel like the architect of their own day. They have impact on the outcome of their day. And I guess there's this worry that with this, you're creating chaos. People are only going to do what they want to do. And, there'll be other jobs that won't get done, but, one person's favorite job will be someone else's most dreaded. I personally, when I was running a bar back home, I would be the one working a 14-hour shift. I would work open till close, and I'm not recommending we do that at all. But, at the end of the day, I would be the one mopping the floor, which was the final job. I was the first one on. I was the last one finished, and I would take pride, seeing my team sit down with a beer to work while I'm finishing the final job. Like, I took pride from that. I got happiness from that. So I don't think it's a case of, people won't do certain jobs. People will work as a team if they're inspired to work as a team, if they find purpose in their job. They will all work together to get it done, and people will have their favorite thing and people will have their less favorite thing. But, if there's more than, just a paycheck, then they're going to work together and they're going to come together and, craft their own day and be in control of their own lives. And with that comes heightened engagement and heightened productivity and performance and, happiness at work. And talked about a talent crisis in hospitality. When people feel these things, they typically don't really leave a role.
I was like sitting and having my own reflection as you were talking. I was thinking back to my McDonald's days where I was like a shift manager, and I absolutely outperform morning shifts. So that means the way you prep to the whole day. And I got satisfaction to see that actually that preparation made sure we hit the performance we need within the team, within revenues, because it all comes down to preparation. I'm a very much like, I like to chop. I like to actually sharpen the saw and chop the wood and carry it. I don't mind. I like that piece of work. It's just other people hated that. They wanted to come as the big part of the day, the night shift or the evening shift, where the sales are the highest and where they can orchestra the team. But at that point, I was tired because I'm a morning person. So I like to get up early and go early to bed. And it's always been like that. So it's very interesting. I was thinking, and we often forget that we don't ask that question. We just think, oh, well, he's a great manager. Let's put him on there. But actually, maybe we don't actually get the optimal out of that person, or we're not giving them the right jobs on the side of that, giving the right responsibility. Like, to become a restaurant manager, you had to be passing scheduling exercise, which means like very tedious. And there's a lot of managers I work struggle with that. I love doing that because it's a Tetris thing. I love to, but lots of people don't like scheduling. So why are you giving them that task? They have to pass that to be the good restaurant manager. So that's just a couple of examples. I love that around the job crafting.
It just goes back to understanding good people and, what they, value in their role. And, it's crazy what you can achieve when you finally, you do this. And that's why, from that management level, it's so important to just take a little step back and let those walls down. And one of the one of the most valuable things that, I see in the workshops I run, I'll just ask a group of, heads of departments, why did you get into hospitality? Like, make them sit back to, like, their much younger self. And there's been some really, inspiring stories. And from that, you can understand their journey. And if more people were asking questions like these, why do you want to work for me? Or why do you want to work in hospitality? Well, what are your goals? What are you looking to achieve? You can, understand people and their journey, and you can help them achieve their goals while also achieving the business's goals. It comes down to just that, understanding people. But I do more than just, asking people questions. It's a little bit more than that, but that's the fundamental piece. If you don't understand people, then you don't understand business.
And you don't understand if you don't ask, I always say. So that I always talk about the potent questions. And the potent questions are the questions that you in a normal environment wouldn't ask. So exactly all those questions, the why, and how good are we actually looking in the mirror, constantly challenging what we're doing. If we're doing well, let's make sure we don't get complacent. That's what some of the best organizations do. Singerman's, other mavericks like Pizza Pilgrims in the UK. I can talk about. They ask themselves that question all the time. These potent questions on every level of the business, so all the way down to the individual employee. Um, a couple more questions because it's a great conversation, Matt, and that's what happens with great conversation. You run out of time, but there's two things I wanted to ask for the audience as well. What do you do now to make sure you get up every day and have the most best version of yourself and make the most positive impact? What is do you have some kind of rituals or anything you're doing to make sure Matt doesn't go back into the dark space he was in?
Yeah. For me, physical fitness is a huge part of my life. When I was sat on the edge of my bed that day, the the decision I made was, why not one more month? The bridge will still be there in a month, but why not just throw myself headfirst into one thing for 1 month? Then, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to be honest with myself in 30 days time. And, if I still feel this way, then go for it. And the thing that I threw myself into was physical fitness. And,
Mm.
it wasn't until during COVID that, I felt incredibly grateful and, actually made me quite emotional that, when I was young, I'd gotten into boxing and, this lovely gentleman back home, he trained me and he showed me around a gym. He owned the gym and he showed me, what to do in a gym. And I felt quite comfortable, but, for what, 8-ish years, I hadn't walked into a gym. I stopped boxing when I was 18, 19. And, but without that guy and without his guidance, I wouldn't have felt, you know, comfortable to do this. I wouldn't have known how to, know, jump into, I guess, a fitness journey. And, that's been a theme throughout the last few years. But right now, I'm actually training for a half marathon. I've been
Right.
training since October. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a knee injury, so I've been rehabbing that, and, I'm currently training twice a day. So to answer your question, the thing I do in the morning these days is I exercise. I've always been an evening exerciser, but now I'm waking up and I'm doing my stretching. I'm doing a bit of cardio, and anyone knows me, they know I'm never a big fan of cardio. It's more about the lifting the weights, but, like the mental benefit of just getting up and being active has been a game changer for me. You know, in the start of winter last year, I was struggling getting out of bed. I'll be completely honest. Like I was starting my day with, no sense of purpose. I was rolling out of bed and making a coffee and slowly starting my day. And ever since switching to, twice a day, and I'm working out for pretty much the same amount of time. It's not like I'm doing double. Ever since I've made this change, my concentration's so much higher, my mood's better. Um, I'm far more present. And, for me, it's exercise, but I think the being present and just taking that time for myself is probably the important bit. And, for me, it's exercise, and someone else, it may just be hanging out with the kids or going for a
Mm.
walk or, meditating. It's just about finding that space in the morning. And for me, it's changed my life. And I wish that it wasn't so life changing because I'm not sure if I want to be someone who works out twice a day for the rest of my life. But right now, I'm incredibly happy doing it.
Yeah, and I guess also what I've learned over the years, rituals change to your circumstance, and you build on them, and you do other things, and you then adapt again. Then you have this arsenal of trained rituals you can bring back. And I have the long version every day. Then I have when I get a little bit busier, I have a shorter version. And then I have like the absolute minimal viable product that needs to happen. Which one of them is meditation, one of them is reading. And if I do those things, and then it's exercise, actually, I have to exercise X amounts a week. And when I had the time, I did both morning and evenings, like yourself. And it really depends on where you are, but you just need is silence, is that me time you talk about, so the dust can settle in your brain because there's so much hitting the brain. What is the top advice you would give to leaders out there trying to build this business as a force for good? Because I think most leaders have the right intent, they just get caught up in things.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think I've ever met a manager that wasn't well intentioned. So I think this topic can be a little bit intimidating for some, in improving well-being and retention and such a big conversation. So the biggest piece of advice I would just give is take the first step. The first step's the hardest, and it can be a small step.
Mm.
It can be a very small step, but just be open to making change and be curious and see what is out there and just start talking to your people. Surveys are great. They can, give you a higher level view of things, but they won't give you, the intimate knowledge of your people. They're a tool for, the greater business to understand, the larger ecosystem. But, I've found some studies come out recently saying, a fair wage is the most important thing to people. And sure, but like the way that's worded, is any employee going to say no?
Yeah.
Like, is anyone going to say, no, I don't want a fair wage? No wonder that comes up, 98% of people. I'm more worried about the 2% that didn't. So, it's taking that first step and understanding your people and what they really want. Because the reasons why people leave jobs are rather interesting, and the things that, fulfill people at work, they're rather interesting, and knowledge is power. When you have this, you can move forward. And, you know, often people don't know where to start. I would say just start with your people because, I mentioned the Oxford study earlier. Often the focus is, on benefits. But I'm very much on a mission right now to bring culture and leadership into this conversation because I feel like without that, then, businesses may just be throwing money down the drain with benefits packages because they may not be doing their intended purpose. They're well intentioned, but without that day to day ground level, environment, then they may be ineffective. So take that first step, be curious, and see what you find, because only when you find it do you then start acting on it. The curiosity is the first step, the action is the next step. But without taking that first step and knowing where to start, then you'll never walk too far.
I love that, Matt. That's a great way to end this amazing conversation. Where can people connect with you, Matt, if they want to talk more about job crafting or just check out what you're up to and what you share online?
So best place is likely LinkedIn. Um, Matthew Cameron on LinkedIn. I've got a website as well, but I'm in the process of building a new one. And that is thatmattcameron.com. Um, and feel free to email me at chat@thatmattcameron.com. But LinkedIn, I'm quite active on. So if you want to find me there, it's probably the easiest place to see a little bit more about what I do in shaping these environments and shaping leadership and helping people be more fulfilled and happy at work and for businesses to be thriving at the same.
Great. Great, Matt. Thank you so much. I'll send you power and energy on the journey, and looking forward to connecting more as we move our way through the hospitality world.
Thank you so much for having me, Marco.